Hello, everyone in video land. We're about to do a podcast, and Mike Schramm is here. Thanks, Mike.
Hello.
It'd be very lonely for me to do this podcast alone, so I appreciate you being here.
No worries. I'm happy to do it for that reason and for any other reasons that you have.
That's awesome. All right, let's get going. Here we go.
When you want to support independent projects and artists and creativity, go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com.
This is the Daily Tech News for Monday, June 16th, 2014. I'm Tom Merritt. Joining me today, Mike Schramm, Manager of Qualitative Insights at EDAR and host of the new Storytime podcast as well. How's it going, Mike?
That's me. Hello, everyone.
Hey, it's good to have you on the Daily Tech News Show. Mike was recently on Current Geek. I've done tons of other podcasts with him. Smart guy. And we're going to get into who won E3 because that's your job right now is figuring that out, right?
Yeah. I went to E3 last week. I used to work for Joystick and TAW, so I've covered E3 for quite a while now. But I went last week because at EDAR we're working on a big E3 report, sort of going through all the news and really covering what worked and what didn't at the show. So we got a lot to talk about today for sure.
Let's get to that after the headlines. The New York Times reports that the U.S. Department of Transportation seeks explicit authority from the U.S. Congress to regulate driving navigation aids, including apps on smartphones. The president's proposed transportation bill includes a provision to give the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration the authority to set restrictions on apps and order changes if those apps are deemed to be dangerous for some reason. Software makers say the rules would be unenforceable and a drag on innovation. That's starting to become their refrain anytime there's regulation. TechCrunch passes along that Amazon announced it now has more than 240,000 apps in the Amazon App Store available in almost 200 countries. As a comparison, though, both Apple and Google have reported about 1.2 million apps each in their stores. Amazon touted an IDC study, funded by Amazon, by the way, that developers make as much money or more on Kindle Fire than on any other platform. Any of this surprise you, Mike?
Well, that's an interesting study that they make as much money or more on Kindle Fire than any other platform. The weird thing about apps is it's not just the quality of the app, it's also like who actually owns the platform that you're running on. So Android, for example, traditionally has more actual handsets out there, but the users actually tend to spend less on Android. So a lot of developers say, oh, well, even though you may not have as many users on iOS, you really want to go for that audience because they spend a little bit more. So it's interesting to hear this. But like you said, I mean, 240,000 is nothing compared to the apps on offer in the other app stores. So Amazon, they kind of suffer from both issues where they both have a smaller install base and also it's just the Kindle Fire users, which is traditionally a fairly cheap handset. So I don't know. Some of those doubts are some of those suggestions are a little bit questionable, but I think it's cool. I think more apps is better in general.
And it'll be easier to test and maybe get some independent study of if Amazon does come out with a phone later this week, because they're having a big announcement. Judy.
Yeah, they got that thing that everyone's been looking at, but no one actually knows what it is.
Whoa.
It's right down here. It's right just off camera somewhere.
I've got one right. Do you have one too?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, gosh.
Whoa.
Wow, that's so cool. Wow.
All right. The Next Web reports BlackBerry announced BBM Protected, bringing enhanced messaging security to its enterprise customers. Business users with BlackBerry device software 6.0 or newer on BES 5, and some customers with BlackBerry 10 smartphones with gold licenses on BES 10 can start using the new feature from today. The extra layer of encryption means BBM Protected users can only send messages to other users of BBM Protected if they want the message to be protected.
So if you still have a BlackBerry phone, go into the drawer where you keep it and go check out BBM Protected.
Talk to your IT manager, see if BBM Protected has been launched. Bloomberg Business Week has the story of Microsoft introducing a new data analysis service that predicts behavior. It's AI stuff, folks. Machine learning, a service that lets users build algorithms to predict things like purchasing patterns and electricity usage. Azure Machine Learning can then host the results on the web through Microsoft Azure Cloud Service, as you might expect. Microsoft believes the service could speed up work for data scientists, but also benefit non-mathematicians as well. Microsoft will offer a public preview of the service, which was codenamed Project Passau in July. Project Passau, P-A-S-S-A-U. GigaOM reports the U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to hear an appeal from a Virginia man convicted of making threats against his ex-wife and former co-workers on Facebook. The man claims the threats were not real because, dude, I made them on Facebook. I don't know if he said dude, but he did make them on Facebook, and that was his defense. The lower court decision used a test for subjective versus objective intent requirements under criminal law. So, Mike, this won't be a test of whether Facebook's threats are real. It's a test of whether you can use Facebook to tell the intent, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Like, I wonder if that's would actually be a good tack to take. I mean, obviously, it's not whether the threat is real or not, because if you say something, you have to presume that you mean it. But I wonder if we did sort of start to consider everything on the internet as sort of a not, more of a subjective situational thing, if that would be better or worse. Because certainly people would say more crazy things, but then you'd say, well, they're just idiots, instead of, this is actually something we should take seriously. I'm not sure about that. It's interesting to me. It's an interesting thought that I haven't heard until this guy brought it up.
Reuters reports a group of companies in the Netherlands hope to have self-driving trucks making deliveries from Rotterdam to other Dutch cities within the next 5 years. So they're putting a deadline on it. Initial testing would start on computer simulations. Trucks would then be tested on a closed track before ultimately heading out on public roads. The proposal is backed by the Transport and Logistics Netherlands Organization, DAF Trucks, Rotterdam Port, and the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research.
This is interesting. So the big question around self-driving cars is, like, would you get in a self-driving car? And you think this, Tom, like, would you feel would you think it's more dangerous driving on a road with self-driving trucks or not? Like, would you be okay with that if you saw them on the road?
I'm unapologetic self-driving car enthusiast. Okay. So I kind of think it's safer. Not that it's going to be accident-free, but I think the algorithms are probably going to end up being safer than humans. I don't think humans are as good at this kind of stuff.
I'm with you, but maybe we're on a tech news show. Maybe we're a little biased. I don't know.
That's a good point. GigaOM reports the European Commission has revealed an agreement with South Korea to work towards a global definition of 5G mobile services and share spectrum and standards as well. The two governments will work together also on cloud and Internet of Things research. China's Huawei, Japan's NTT Docomo, and the U.S.'s Intel are also all independently working on 5G. I just want everyone to agree on 5G and what it means and use that term appropriately when it finally comes around.
It sets a pattern, too, because then you can have 6G, 7G, goes all the way up till 10G, and then it's got to be XG.
Then it's, then we can go to kiloGs and then megaGs. SP Sheridan is among the folks who submit stuff on our subreddit. If you haven't checked it out, get in there and do so. dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. It's the place where folks who listen to the show can have an effect on what we talk about in lots of different ways. I look at it generally to see what you guys are interested in over there, but I also pick stories based mostly on the votes to go in this section of news from you. SP Sheridan sent the Science Alert story about an artificial pancreas controlled by a smartphone that helps regulate blood glucose levels. Clinical trials showed it worked better at regulating glucose levels than either fingerstick tests or manually injected insulin. A team from Boston University developed a system which uses a removable sensor inserted under the skin to beam real-time glucose levels to a smartphone. Then the app on the smartphone calculates what's needed to balance blood sugar and sends a signal to an implanted pump. Patients can even input what they're eating, so the app knows what to expect as far as changes coming down the road or coming down the gut.
I'm in on this as long as there's Game Center support and achievements. As long as those two are included, I'll do it.
You gamify your glucose levels. Actually, that might be pretty awesome.
That sounds fun, yeah.
I am the most balanced of all my friends. Captain Kipper posted the Torn Freak article that Automatic, the proprietors behind WordPress, are seeking $10,000 plus $14,250 in attorney's fees for alleged abuse of copyright takedown notices. You may recall this case. Oliver Hotham wrote an article on his WordPress blog last November about Straight Pride UK, including a quote from the organization Straight Pride UK's press officer, whose name is Nick Steiner. Steiner didn't like the quote. He sent a copyright takedown notice to WordPress alleging Hotham had violated his copyright. Hotham and Automatic claim the quote was fair use. It was from a press release, so it did not violate copyright, and therefore Steiner's takedown notice, which did result in the post being removed — WordPress was kind of hogtied by the DMCA rules — that takedown notice was an abuse of the system. So we'll see if they win in court.
Mm-hmm.
Metal Freak posted the Ars Technica article that a list of Microsoft patents that apply to Android have been published on a Chinese language version of the Chinese government's Ministry of Commerce website. The list was compiled apparently as a result of the government's antitrust review of Microsoft's purchase of Nokia and as part of a page regarding the conditions related to the approval of that merger. The English language version of the page does not include the list of patents. S.P. Sheridan pointed out the BBC story that the U.S. government is lifting restrictions on satellite images. Up until now, services like Bing Maps could not use images where the features were smaller than 50 centimeters, at least 50 centimeters visible. That restriction is going to be lowered to 31 centimeters. A company called Digital Globe applied to the U.S. Department of Commerce asking for the restrictions to be lifted. The company's Worldview 3 satellite is due to launch in August. And Metal Freak posted the Ars Technica story that a Bitcoin mining contributor known as Ghash, it's a group of miners, has been topping 51% of Bitcoin's total cryptographic hashing output for many times, including a span of 12 hours on June 12th. Any one entity that processes more than 50% can be troublesome to the decentralized nature of the Bitcoin system. A miner with more than 50% could theoretically spend a Bitcoin twice because it verifies itself, reject competing miners' transactions, extort higher fees from people with large holdings. Researchers from Cornell University detected the peak and have recommended a hard Bitcoin fork, which that recommendation is proving controversial as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's such a new Bitcoin's such a new thing in general that it seems very likely that someone's gonna figure out different ways to tweak the system and things like that. And obviously, it's not a quote unquote illegal way. I don't know that there are laws actually governing that, but definitely, like, it's interesting to hear that people are sort of finding ways to sort of take over that Bitcoin system. But would the fork solve it? Like, the fork, how would that work?
Well, I think the idea, I didn't read into the specifics of the recommendations, but they had 3 recommendations that they say would sort of discourage large groups from forming and getting close to that 50% threshold. You would have to respect the previous blockchain up until the fork and then get everybody from there on to respect the new blockchain. That could cause some other problems, though, if people don't fork and this and that. So kind of hard to implement, which is
just like most other things with Bitcoin. I don't really understand that, but I'm sure it's cool.
Yeah, exactly. And that, my friends, is a look at the headlines. Hey, the Daily Tech News Show Wiki has a new home. If you haven't found it already, the DCTVpedia site for Diamond Club Television is a wiki chronicling the antics of podcasters Brian Brushwood, Justin Robert Young, Andrew Main, Veronica Belmont, and myself. The wiki has an excellent show list featuring all the guests and detailed episode notes, so huge thanks to everyone who is updating that wiki and anyone who has ever updated one of our wikis. I think we're finally settling on the wiki of the moment here. You're all wikitastic, and you can find it at dtns.tv/wiki. That short URL used to go to the other one, now it goes to the new DCTVpedia one. All right, Mike Schramm. We've had a week to reflect on E3. We've got people out there saying Nintendo did a great job of showing first-party titles and why they're fun, that Microsoft did a great job of focusing on gamers again and apologizing and saying, no, we are here for video gamers, and that Sony leaped out ahead and took advantage of its front position to say, we're also going to do these amazing things. Who won E3, Mike?
Wow, okay. I mean, I think, like most things, it depends on, who won E3. It depends on who you think won E3. I do agree that Nintendo had, for a company that sort of said that they weren't going to go to E3 or they weren't going to participate as much in E3 this year, I do think that Nintendo did a great job. That Nintendo Direct conference, especially if you were at home, on the show floor, I would say their showing wasn't quite as impressive. Like they really had a lot of Super Smash Brothers shown. They definitely were showing off that new Splatoon game, and they had a number of other titles. They had Bayonetta 2, which was really impressive. So on the show floor, I don't know that they were quite as impressive, but if you were watching from home, that Nintendo Direct was very impressive and was really cool, and actually might convince the other companies that they could plan out their press conferences a little bit more. Like Nintendo Direct, because they didn't have to do it live, they sort of had some video plans and they had some cool things that they did. But on the other hand, like as much as people really like Nintendo, a lot of the stuff that they showed that people walked away going like that was really cool was like Star Fox Wii U, which we didn't even see anything of, and The Legend of Zelda Wii U, which looked cool, but it was just a preview.
A horse. It was just a horse in a field, a very beautiful field.
And even the boss fight, which looked neat, was just a pre-generated, cinematic, basically. So yeah, I think that Nintendo did well for what they did, and definitely, they did not have to buy out a whole theater. They did not have to have a whole audience there. So that was definitely smart, I think, on their part. They also had some big announcements that, were not even shown on the show floor. The Amiibo announcement, Nintendo's Skylanders, basically, was very impressive. I think it's very smart on their part. I think it's going to be really successful. And I don't know if even a lot of the sites wrote about this, but the only demonstration that they had on the show floor, like available to the crowds, was a glass case. Like they just had a glass case of Amiibo figures, and they weren't actually, you couldn't play with them. It wasn't clear how they were used. It wasn't straightforward at all. So I think Nintendo did very well, but I don't know that they necessarily won E3. Sony had a very impressive press conference. You're right that last year they sort of made the biggest splash, and they definitely came out swinging. They said, we're supporting users. We're going to do, they had the funny video where here's how to share a game on PS4, and you pass a disc over to the next guy. So that was fun last year. This year, I think a lot of their announcements were really cool. They definitely came out swinging with Destiny, like they really were showing that off and really, really playing, that one of their themes too was the games that you're most interested in are going to be best on the PlayStation 4, which I think is the smartest thing to do. They're definitely in the lead at the moment on the consoles, so saying Destiny's going to be best on the PS4, Assassin's Creed going to be best on the PS4. So I think they did a lot of smart stuff there as well. But did they win? I mean, the PlayStation Now stuff was actually a little bit boring. I think it's going to be very important in the future to have all the streaming games available, but I think a lot of people were sort of bored by that part. And also the PlayStation TV. I don't know. What do you think about the PlayStation TV there, Tom? It's a cool idea, but is it amazing? I don't know.
I think it's not for the E3 audience. Or if it is, it's sort of a secondary if you've got an extra room and you didn't want to buy a second game console, then this could help you play some games in that room. But it's really targeted for people who are out there looking at Amazon Fire TV and Apple TV and thinking, well, I want something that gives me a little more. Maybe some access to some games would be the thing to push people over the top. That seems to be what everybody's trying to do. Even Roku has Angry Birds and some other games forced in there. So it's the best of that kind of device if that kind of device is desired by people, because it's going to have, and they very clearly did not make a big deal out of this, but the Japanese version has Hulu and Netflix and all these video services, so one would assume those will be on there. And then and you can play all your a bunch of Vita titles, and you can stream games from your PS4, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's pretty compelling and to another audience.
Yeah, that and PlayStation Now both will be bigger than they were at the press conference itself, but I also think that, as much as Sony really came out showing games, they had the hardware stuff, which people weren't that excited by. And then, you go to Microsoft, where they definitely learned lessons from last year. They said, they have Phil, I'm going to mess it up. Is it Phil Harrison? Spencer or Phil Harrison? Phil Spencer. I mix those two up.
Phil Spector. Wait, no.
He very clearly said, we're talking about games this year. Last year, they were showing off TV stuff. They were showing off channel changing, and no one cared. And at E3, they came out saying, we're going to show games. And they showed a lot of really great games. Sunset Overdrive looked really good. That was a really cool one. Scalebound is the new the new one from Platinum Games. It looks really cool. They didn't really show any gameplay. It wasn't playable on the show floor, but it definitely looked neat. One of the hits they took last year was, Sony was like, we're really in support of independent developers, and that's something Sony repeated this year. And Microsoft said, no, we have independent developers too, and they definitely had indies come out and show things on the show floor. And I actually moved even away from hardware, I would say, a little bit. They had one game in their press conference that was that focused on Kinect stuff. And that was Dance Central Spotlight, which is going to be sort of a downloadable version of Dance Central that's coming from Harmonix. And even the Dance Central Spotlight teaser, they never really showed Kinect. Like, they just sort of showed the songs that were coming to it.
It's almost like they were embarrassed. Like,
yeah.
Oh, right, this is a Kinect game.
I mean, I don't think that and they definitely said after the show, there were a couple interviews that came out where they said, we have more Kinect stuff to show you. And they also said that a lot of the stuff that they did show on the show floor, like Forza Horizon, like the Master Chief Collection, had Kinect features that weren't necessarily mentioned in the press conference. But yeah, it definitely was not a focus at all. It wasn't the focus of the press conference, and it wasn't a focus on the show floor either. Microsoft did have some Kinect features, and Sony did have some Project Morpheus stuff, but hardware was not the focus of the show at all. So who won E3? I mean, I think everybody had the good and the bad. I could go really cheap and say consumers won E3 this year.
Yes, gamers won. That's who won with all of these wonderful choices.
But personally, I will say, I mean, I do think that Sony had a really great showing. Sony is in the lead with the PS4 at the moment. Sony games, and Sony also did something that I thought was very, very smart, which is in many cases they let the games speak for themselves. Little Big Planet, actually, the way that they announced that game was they loaded up the demo and showed the title screen for the demo, which was weird. Most of the times when they announce these games, they say, well, we've been working on this game for a long time, and it's going to be really cool, and the game that we're working on is Little Big Planet 3. But to announce Little Big Planet 3, they actually just pulled up the demo, and they just played the game. And that was so impressive to me that they just, brought up the game and showed it off, and it looked really fun, and it was actually one of the best demos, I think, in the press conferences. People were laughing at it. People were having a great time with it. There were even some mistakes that they made, but they worked out anyway. Like, the game didn't crash. They just said, oh, well, we'll fix it this way. And so it was really cool. So, I mean, I do think that the Sony press conference ran a little bit long. I would have maybe slowed down a little bit on the PlayStation Now and the PlayStation TV because I thought those segments got people a little bit bored. But in terms of the different types of games they showed, they announced Magic 2 during the press conference, which is a cool little cult game that not a lot of people probably knew ahead of time. And then they had big titles like Destiny and Little Big Planet and Drive Club and all those titles. So they also announced the remastered Grim Fandango, which is an announcement that came out of nowhere. People were very excited about. So I would say, just looking at the press conferences and looking at the showing on the show floor, Sony did pretty well.
I feel like nobody lost. Microsoft did what they needed to do. Mm-hmm. Nintendo seems to have revitalized their reputation somewhat and maybe made some people think, oh, well, the Wii U may not be perfect, but it's got some good stuff coming. Sony didn't give up their lead, though. So if there was a winner, I guess it's Sony because they didn't screw it up, and they still got, by all accounts, the games that everybody wants to play. Does it matter if somebody wins E3, though?
Well, it matters in that fanboys want to make sure they know who won E3. Like, they want to make sure they get their punches in and do all that stuff. The other thing was, there were a couple articles that came out earlier this year before E3 that were talking about, does E3 really matter? Does E3 make a difference? And I was interviewed for a couple of those articles as an analyst, because that's my job now. And I really argue that E3 does matter, no matter who wins, because it really is a place to sort of check in on how the video game industry is doing. Like, it's a place to show off what's new and what's happening, what's going on.
Kind of a State of the Union sort of thing.
Yeah, sort of a State of the Union, and not just a State of the Union for gamers and for tech people specifically, but even a State of the Union for mainstream people, like for people who play games only every once in a while, or maybe only buy one console, or only play it every once in a while. So while the gamers will always dive in and try to figure out what's going on, and while the tech people will always be like, okay, does PlayStation TV work? Does this type of stuff work? How do these companies do? I think in terms of what E3 is designed to do, which is sort of drum up some interest in video gaming at this time of year before the holiday stuff starts, I think it worked. I think it worked really well. And attendance for E3 was actually up this year. I think interest was pretty good. I think there were some games that really stuck out that were really cool. And so I think in general it was a solid E3. It was a good E3 all the way around. I don't know if it was like, groundbreaking E3 last year. We were very excited because we had 2 new consoles. We had, the Wii U as well, and there was a lot of surprises and a lot of big announcements. And this year, I don't know if there were quite as many surprises, but I do think that we got to see a lot of the game. It's a lot of like, okay, we have these consoles in our houses now. We know what they're capable of because we have one. I have one hooked up. I have one, maybe even 2 hooked up to my TV. And so the big question this year was, what are the games going to be like? What are the games over the next year going to look like? And I think those questions all got answered. Like, there's a lot of cool games to be excited about if you're a gamer for sure.
So, as cheesy as it may sound, we all won E3.
No. Yeah. I mean, Sony, but everybody else is fine.
We all won E3. Sony won it more.
What games were you? So this is the fun part too. Like, it's fun for me to talk about the companies and talk about the press conferences. But for my favorite thing about E3, my favorite stuff is just walking around the floor and finding cool games that I maybe wasn't quite considering, or I wasn't sure about, or maybe that I've never even heard of before. So did you see anything come out that you were really excited about? Or I definitely have. Like, I'm asking you this question, so you'll ask it back to me. Like, there's definitely a lot of games that I'm interested in coming forward.
Sure. No, what's that Sony indie game? No Man's Sky? Is that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's done by Hello Games, which they actually premiered it at the VGAs last year. Mm-hmm. And Hello Games is a company that did the Joe Danger games, which are sort of a cartoony, fun racing game. And yeah, at the VGAs last year, they premiered this No Man's Sky, which is like a weird, like, explore these infinite number of planets and run around the world. And it was announced at E3 that Sony has basically co-opted them and said, okay, you're going to release on the PlayStation 4. And yeah, they showed up in the press conference. It was cool. It's definitely like old school sci-fi explore the world, which I agree sounds very fun.
So what was the one that turned your head?
The one that I really liked most, just personally, I don't know that this was necessarily a game of the show for everyone, but Lord of the Rings Shadow of Mordor it's a game that we had heard about before, and we kind of knew the features of it, but we hadn't really seen them in action yet. It was sort of a thing where it's like, here's what we're going to do, but at E3 they showed off a full demo, I think it was about a half-hour demo of the game. It wasn't playable yet, so I haven't gotten a chance to get my hands on it, so I definitely reserve the opinion of saying that it's awesome because I haven't actually checked it out personally, but the demo that they did was so impressive because when you see the gameplay, it kind of looks like Assassin's Creed. It looks like a regular sort of open world run around stabbing people game, but the real key here is that they have a thing called the Nemesis system that uses the power of the consoles to create dynamic quests and dynamic enemies for your guy. So every time you open up a game, it creates a series of completely randomly generated orc bosses for you to go after. And these orc bosses are all connected dynamically through in the sort of political system. So, like, there are orc bosses that oversee the whole thing, and then there are, like, mid-bosses and sub-bosses, and then low-level orcs.
Wait, where do Uruk-hai fit in there?
They're all part of the whole. I don't know. Uruk-hai, I think, are humans who became orcs. Maybe, I don't know. The Lord of the Rings guys are gonna kill me for that one, but the idea is that you have this sort of randomly generated political system, and then if you want to destabilize the system, you can go after specific guys in the open world, and you can start taking those guys out or co-opting them and making them your minions, and you can sort of bring down the system. Really cool. By taking over. Yeah, so it's really cool. And it sort of comes into this whole, like, Game of Thrones type thing where you're like, okay, I want to take out this guy, and here's his 3 minions, and I got to take those guys out and sort of take it apart. And you sort of start to get involved in the political thing. And it's fairly easy to create randomly generated enemies. Like, you just put a bunch of features in and then randomly choose a bunch of them. But Shadow of Mordor seems to do it in a way that is really effective in that, like, they'll have a guy named, like, Grom the Bone Chewer or whatever, and they'll actually have him wear bone armor because he's a bone chewer.
Right.
And they'll make him, like, immune to fire or make him leech life. And so it's randomly generated in a way that makes you feel like it's crafted content, so which is pretty impressive.
That's very impressive.
Yeah. So Shadow of Mordor really stuck out for me. I mean, Evolve is really cool. Evolve definitely did a great presentation and, like, really had good showing in the show floor. It's a little complicated for the audience, I think, that they're going for, but it's definitely a cool title. Sunset Overdrive looked really good. The Witcher 3 was very impressive as well. So there's a lot of really good games, I think, coming out of the show. On the Nintendo side, Splatoon, like I said, looked really cool.
Yeah, Splatoon looks fun.
Yep, it's like a sort of a casual shooter where you're shooting paint around and trying to paint a level, and there are different abilities that you can provide with that stuff. There's a lot of cool. A Little Big Planet, like I said, looked really neat. Destiny, I just finished playing the alpha over the weekend, and that game is World of Halo Craft. It's really fun, like for better or worse.
I pre-ordered it. It looks gorgeous.
Yeah. It looks great, and the design of it is really interesting. Like they're definitely trying to build a platform where people can they can like infinitely add content to it for sure. So it's really neat. So there's a lot of fun stuff. I go to E3. I've been to E3 quite a bit over the past 7 to 10 years or so, and there's definitely E3s where you come away from them and you're like, oh, I don't know what is going to happen this year. But this year, I'm excited. There's a lot of really cool stuff. And for 2015, too, like a lot of the titles that they showed were actually not coming out until next year. But I'm definitely excited to see what's coming for the rest of this year. So.
Which is good, because it was all about the games, and you want the games to get you excited. It's easy to get excited when a Project Morpheus, becomes the big news, or new consoles like we had last year. It's a better sign when, look, all we really had to announce was games, but the games are great.
Yeah, there's no shortage of games. And the thing is, too, like a lot of people said, oh, well, Microsoft decided to go for games. That's very smart. It's like, listen, at E3, an event centered on games, you're never going to go wrong supporting games. So it is a smart choice, but it's like, come on, like that's the way that this works. So
yes, but the obvious choices are not always the ones that are made, are they?
Fair enough. Very true. Very true.
All right, let's take a quick look at the calendar. Just one thing tomorrow, Adobe Q2 earnings will be released. Our pick of the day comes from Lauren Ahrens.
Hang on. Before you get to the pick of the day, Tom, don't forget, the rumors all say the Steam summer sale starts tomorrow. That should be.
Oh, is that going to happen?
Supposedly tomorrow you will lose all of your money because Steam will have sales going on that. So stay tuned for that too. Go ahead.
Yeah, keep an eye out for that. Lauren Ahrens, I was talking about travel apps because I was traveling over the weekend, and I mentioned TripIt and FlightAware, but Lauren pointed out Seat Guru, which is another great one. It's available online and through app stores. Lauren travels 35 plus weeks a year to different locations, so sticking with a single airline is impossible. Says, when I'm not sure of the seat layout on an airline or when I have someone new join the team, I suggest and use Seat Guru to help book the best seat available. My travel tip, the exit rows have additional room, and the back row of most airlines over wing exits recline, unlike the forward row. Choose wisely, my friend.
Very smart.
And Seat Guru is linked from TripIt as well, so when you're actually looking at booking stuff, you can look at your seats through TripIt. All our picks are at dailytechnewsshow.com/picks. Couple messages to finish us up here, and since no show about games would be complete without a comment on Steambox, here's Dan, aka Metal Freak, says, I'm most likely going to build a Steam machine because it runs Linux and because I don't like playing video games with a keyboard or on my laptop. Tom, you talked about the PS3 being able to run Linux on BOL back when it could. Then I got a PS3, so yeah, I am that crazy. However, while I'm a geek, I do have friends who aren't, and if they like my Steam machine, they might want one, but they don't know how to build their own, and I most likely won't have time to do it for them. Working for friends can be tricky, so true. So they would then buy a pre-built Steam box. If they don't talk to me first, it's annoying how often that happens, they will most likely just go to steam.com and buy directly from there. I know this topic has been dragged out, but I figured I should get in my 2 cents. And I guess that is an interesting path that he's talking about, Mike, where Steam catches on because the geeky guys go and build Steam boxes, and then some of their friends and relatives say, oh, well, that looks interesting, and realize, oh, I can buy a consumer-friendly version of that as well.
Yes, I would say that that's interesting. I would also argue, though, that those people won't Google where to find it. So it might be something where you, Dan, are actually sitting there and saying, no, go to Steam's website. You can buy one there. So it might be even the geek that's sort of pushing them in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. Finally, Scott Wilhelm writes in with his take on Amazon Prime Music. He says, like others, I was a little skeptical about Prime Music offering. Stacked up directly against Spotify, Rdio, or Pandora, it certainly doesn't match up quite as well on paper. After using it this weekend, though, I've come to see value in it. I found the playlist curation to be very nice, and after using them, the biggest personal benefit of the service hit me. I haven't subscribed to Spotify or Rdio because I don't want to spend $120 a year on music. I do, however, already spend and make use of the $99 a year for Prime. If I do want a song not available by Prime Music, I can simply buy it and own it. No need to subscribe to an additional service. Now, it's certainly not a perfect service, especially missing a big label like Universal. Well, they're not missing them entirely, but it's reduced. And no radio feature. But given that it has a lot of music I like at no additional charge, I think it's a good option for folks who feel the same way I do. It's an interesting take where he's saying, look, what Amazon's doing is no different than what they do when they sell you a Kindle Fire. They sell it to you for cheap in the hopes that you're going to buy stuff with it. Amazon Prime Music is given to you as part of your Prime feature so that you'll then buy music that isn't available in Amazon Prime Music.
Yeah, I mean, if you already buy Prime, it's a no-brainer, obviously. But if you're looking for, like, if you're going to buy Prime just because you want a music subscription service, I like Spotify. I mean, I think, having access to that music is going to be better for you. So I think it's more of, if you have Prime, this is adding value to Prime, not a replacement for a dedicated music subscription service.
Totally agree. But it could upsell you. I could see myself, because I use Amazon Music Cloud Music Player, I could see myself saying, oh, well, you know what? This playlist I got free from Prime would be perfect with this one other song. It's only 99 cents.
Right, which is what Amazon wants it to be anyway. Like, they just want to add more value to Prime, so you jump in. And, any other things that they add to Prime are for that same reason. It's like, put it all on Prime.
Well, thank you, Mike Schramm. Really great to get your take, your kind of, perspective on E3 from the distance of not only time, but being able to say you've got all of this experience of seeing the E3s over the year. Really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's a joy as always. Keep up the good work over here.
Oh, thanks, man. EDAR.com, EEDAR.com is the company Mike works for. If you are in the industry, you definitely want to check that out. And, of course, everybody follow Mike on Twitter, twitter.com/Mike Schramm. That's SCHRAMM, 2 M's in there as well. Anything else to let folks know about before we let you go?
No. I continue to follow the game industry. I guess I'm going to Casual Connect, so if you're going there, I'll see you there. Otherwise, I'll just be around. Follow me on Twitter.
Find them on Twitter. Don't forget, folks, you can have a voice in what stories we cover at our subreddit, dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. You can email us, feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. Give us a call, 512-59-DAILY. That's 512-593-2459. Listen to the show live, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 Pacific at mobile.alphageekradio.com. Our website is dailytechnewsshow.com. If you want to support the show, and I thank all 4,120 people who do, you guys are amazing keeping us going, go to bit.ly/helpdtns. Tomorrow, Molly Wood joins us, along with a guest who only has a couple of absolute rules in his life, but one of them is when given the opportunity to be on a show with Molly Wood, say yes. Patrick Beja will be with Molly tomorrow.
That guy's good too.
See you then.
This podcast is part of the Frog Pants Studios Network. For more information about this and other shows, visit frogpants.com. Audio program so good, it's like you're there.
I missed the button. I tried to do it, Jenny, but I screwed it up this time.
It's okay. It's Monday.
Good show, though. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks. I got to run to a meeting, but thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, man. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mike. Bye.
See y'all later. Bye.
Patrick Beja, what a prince.
A prince among men in a country that killed all its princes.
Princes. Oh, no. Way to go, all French Revolution on that compliment.
Watch out for the guillotine, Patrick.
Oh, boy. All right, so titles. We had one that was 51% E3, which was how much the show was going to be about E3. And then my favorite, I have to scroll back up because I wrote it, that I like Grom the Bone Chewer. Because it's the game I'm most excited about. So excited that I will forgive him for saying that Uruk-hai used to be people.
He knew he was wrong as soon as he said it. That's why he's like, oh,
I honestly, I actually can't tell you what Tolkien thought the Uruk-hai were. Because I can only tell you what Peter Jackson thought they were.
Oh.
Tolkien didn't really get all that much into the origin of the Uruk-hai.
They were made by Count Dooku, right?
Nice. Don't you see it, Count Dooku, in this house? This house is Phantom Menace free.
I was watching Clone Wars, though, on Netflix the other day. They had Count Dooku in it.
I've never seen Clone Wars. I
It's
heard
okay.
it was pretty alright.
It's exactly right. It's like, oh, it's better than the prequels for most of us who didn't really like the prequels as much. And if you're like just want a little Star Wars in your life, it's a great place to get some Star Wars in your life.
If you mean didn't really like the prequels, do you mean feeling betrayed and devastated beyond all imagining to the point where you're so scared to even look at anything done by J.J. Abrams? Is that what you mean?
I would include that in there, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then that's me.
I don't like trashing the prequels personally, and I don't disrespect anyone who does. That's totally fine. But I guess there's just still a part of me that wants to pretend like they were better than they were.
I respect that as a defensive mechanism. I think that's totally fair, because to admit that the prequels were atrocious is to admit that basically like the god of our childhood didn't know what he was doing. It calls into question the entire religion of Star Wars. So I get that. That being said, I was pretty damn disappointed at 21 years old, walking into out of that theater and trying to like hold on and be like, no, it was good, really. It was very good.
It was never very good. I deluded myself into thinking it was good enough to go back twice to get the plot elements, which I wanted to get. But man, yeah, it's why I'm fascinated with the re-edits, because I'm like, there is a good story in there.
Yes, much less of it, and not involving like 3 of the major characters. But yeah, there were lots of people doing reasonably, like, look, Ewan McGregor was doing like reasonably good acting for being really uncomfortable on a green screen.
And he did a great young Alec Guinness.
He did. It was great.
I thought he did.
There are parts of that. Sam Jackson was great. Like, there are parts of those movies that hold up, but like, oh man. The initial, I think I'll never recover from being so excited of seeing the first poster for Phantom Menace, the one with Jake Lloyd and the shadow, and like after all that time to be given something so wonderful and then to have it ripped away.
Well, the good news is,
sorry, that was a
we
rant.
get another chance at it.
That was an official Jenny Josephson rant.
No, that's good.
Uh-oh. Must have been the mention of Molly.
That made you ranty.
Yeah, it was a little ranty.
Got your Molly up.
Yeah.
Did she ever tell you the story about the person she worked with that everyone in the office was like ranking their dander? And like the deal would be like she'd come into the office and they'd be like, dander is up today. And she's like, okay, good to know.
Nice. The dander report is in. It is not looking pretty.
Dander is up. Oh, this is why.
Ken from Chicago. I'm not even going to say it out loud, but it made me laugh.
Yep.
I will not do a Jar Jar imitation live.
We are doing Grom the Bone Chewer, right?
Yeah, I think Grom the Bone Chewer is
Grom the Bone
really
Chewer.
just... When are you get a chance to do that title?
Never again. I almost wrote Daily Tech News Shower because I was thinking Bone Chewer.
Nice.
2257 is our imaginary number.
There's no place like home. Let's see. What else is happening today?
Good second patron report.
Oh, thanks.
That was awesome.
Yeah, I forgot. I was going to do it on Saturday, and then we watched a lot of Wires, and I forgot. So I basically sound like a drunkard with a microphone.
No, you don't. You don't sound like a drunkard at all.
A hungover drunkard.
Maybe you got them WMDs.
Yeah, I got the
You got them
WMDs.
You got them red tops.
Yep, yellow tops, yellow tops.
Oh, this is fun. Now Brian and I can make Wire references to you.
Yep. It's actually correcting a very long-standing issue in our household, which is that the first time Matt went to watch The Wire, I was very creatively involved in another project, and so I passed, knowing it was The Wire, and knowing I should not pass. I did, and oh boy, I have not heard the end of it since.
So is he watching it with you again?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And even he says that he's getting like so much more out of it this time because he has someone to chew over it with.
Yeah. Well, and it's just too much to absorb once, I feel like.
Yep.
You're never going to get it all.
Yep. So we are having a lot of fun, and I do feel like someone who's been taken out of a time capsule, and now I get to make like all these funny jokes about like Poot. You know, like,
yeah.
You know, I'm like 10 years too late Wire fan.
You're going to go buy Jameson's flask-sized bottles and put them in paper bags and head down to the tracks.
I looked, and no one has coined super drunk bunk on the internet, so I think it's going to be me.
About damn time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eileen watched it after I watched it. Because it was a similar thing where we both started watching it, and then she got distracted with work and couldn't, and so I just I forged ahead because I had The Wire, the challenge on frame rate. And then when she finally got around to watching it, I watched it as much as I could with her again. I told she was watching it when I wasn't home because I was like, don't wait, just keep going.
Yeah, it is a tremendous show, and it took me almost all of season 1 to actually get into it.
That's apparently the normal pace. Most people do take about that first season to really get hooked.
Yeah. So, but now all is well. The balance of the Force, the midi-chlorians are in balance in our household because I am watching The Wire.
Did you ever watch The Shield?
No, we missed The Shield, so that could at some point be next, or Justified might be next.
Yeah, that's another one. Brian's a big
really
fan of The Shield.
Yeah.
So that was the next one he was campaigning to get me to watch.
Oh yeah, no. Matt has decreed that Orange is the New Black is next.
Oh well, yeah.
We watched season 1, so.
We watched one episode and then we got distracted with stuff. But
yeah.
We'll get back into it this week, I think.
Distracted with stuff is the story of our lives.
That's actually one of the downsides of Netflix giving the whole season at once, which is great if you have the time to dig in and just binge. But because you don't have that pressure of like an episode happening every week and feeling like, oh, I'm falling behind, I need to hurry up and watch them. You're like, oh, they'll always be there. You don't get pushed into watching them.
Yeah.
Your DVR is not going to delete them or anything.
Yeah, and then that's what happened with us with Arrested Development was like the reboot. We were like super excited, and we watched a couple, and we couldn't quite adjust to the storytelling mechanism, and then there didn't feel like there was any urgency to keep watching.
Yeah, right. I wonder if that's a service that could be provided. Alternate urgency for your Netflix shows.
Yeah, alternate like artificial urgency.
Yeah.
Instead of artificial intelligence.
Netflix motivational coaches.
Yeah. Well, they used to do that in the sense that they would like remove things from these services online.
Well, they would remove them because they'd lost their deals.
The license.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you would probably be interested in the fact that one of our friends from college had a very important role in The Wire.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I wrote it in the chat room because I didn't want to get into what the role was. But it's very now that means something to me in a way that it didn't totally before.
I can see that. All right, I'm almost done with the post.
Cool. Oh yeah, my associate producer on one of my Yahoo shows, her brother was Wallace.
Oh, really?
How about them apples? I know.
Wallace, he showed up in a couple other shows.
Friday
later.
Night Lights. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Friday Night Lights. That's the one.
He was great. And he's going to be Johnny Human Torch.
That's... yeah, nice.
Yeah. So yeah, those are my 2 wire connections. They're pretty good. But I don't think I have any other connections per se to the great geniuses of hour-long drama.
Oh, TV Zegon suggests motivation through spoilers.
Oh yeah, that's true.
All right, I'm out of
that's a fair
the
bit.
I'm out of the post. It's all yours.
Going in.
I'm going in. Show Noten.
Joe Norton across the universe on the Starship Enterprise.
Well, that is it, folks.
I am so happy about Grom the Bone Chewer, let me tell you.
Grom your bone chewers, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Monday, so forgive us.
Hang on, dear. Let's see. Update. Done.
Done.
All right, it's
As
grocery buy-in time.
That's a superpower right there.
Yep,